Welcome to How to Sell More. Today, we are talking about profits with today's guest, Melissa Houston. As you will hear, Melissa's on a mission to tackle the shocking fact that 82% of businesses crash and burn because they're making financial mistakes. And with over 2 decades of experience, Melissa is here to drop some serious knowledge to help make sure that if you run a business, if you manage a business, if you're responsible in any way, I guess, listen, if you work for a big corporate company, if you're a middle manager, if you're very happy in your department, you're not responsible for finances, maybe you want to skip this one, but I don't think so, because it's going to make you a better sales lead. It's going to make you a better marketer. It's going to make you a better business strategist, or if nothing else, when you do decide to crack out on your own as that consultant, as that contractor, as that freelancer in the gig economy, this stuff is going to matter. Now, as you will hear, Melissa Houston, who is a CPA, the author of the book Cash Confident, founder of the She Means Profit blog and podcast, which helps female entrepreneurs manage their finances with confidence. I'm even going to warn you, there are 2 or 3 times in this where I'm completely surprised and caught off guard. Make sure you listen for those. So if you are a business leader who is tired of not having the profits you need or the finances in a place where you feel confident in the decisions you are making, you have got to hear the conversation I have with Melissa Houston. I am Mark Drager. Let's get into it. Melissa Houston, you are a fellow Canadian. You know how I know that? I Google your name and a 613 phone number comes up, which tells me you're in the Ottawa area. How you doing?
I had no idea you were Canadian. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm a 905er. I'm a 905er. So
okay, Toronto, right?
Yeah. I live just in the GTA, but my brother-in-law lives up just outside of Ottawa in a little tiny French town called Embrun.
Embrun. Okay, I have a couple of friends that live out there. Embrun is what they say.
I don't know what they say, but I do know it's right near Calypso Water Park, and so it's a great place to go. But I'm really excited to bring you on because the vast majority of the conversations we have are around marketing or around sales, around KPIs, around all these things. But you are a CPA and you have written books and you have spoken at all of the large organizations, and you have really focused on, frankly, the stuff that I'm the weakest at. My CFO, my controller will tell you, he's been with me for 17 years now, and he's very, very patient, but I am not a numbers guy. I am a marketer. I like to sell. I like to have vision. I like to have team. My COO, my integrator, he's pretty good at numbers, but he's not a numbers guy. Most of us get out there as marketers, as salespeople, as business leaders, and we just focus on more revenue, more expenses, more team, more what's next, more. And I have watched too many people grow themselves out of business focusing on more. So if we shouldn't be focusing on that, what should we be focusing on?
Oh, such a good question. And first of all, like, you are not alone with the not being strong with the numbers thing. Most business owners aren't. It is, you go into business because you do what you're passionate about. And nobody really thinks, oh yeah, I have to know my business numbers, right? And focusing on your business numbers will help you increase the profit in your business, right? Because profit drives business growth. And I like the way that you touched on everybody's looking for more revenue. And yes, revenue is absolutely imperative in your business. But if you're not making profit with that revenue, your efforts are fruitless, really, because you have to be making profit so that you can grow your business, right? So many business owners are operating from a loss standpoint and not looking at their numbers and not understanding that, and therefore not correcting it before it becomes such a problem that it puts their business at risk and they have to close down.
I've often wondered if Simon Sinek, whatever, start with why. I've often watched and wondered if this whole purpose-driven leader, purpose-driven entrepreneur, we're going to save the world type of organization has actually done a disservice to many leaders, because the whole idea of like, do what you love and the money will come later. I mean, yeah, if you very carefully later focus on the money.
Yeah.
Or, just do great work and drive value for people and the money will come later. Yeah. As long as you do all of that stuff and then follow it up with structure and SOPs and focusing on expenses and profitability and like all the stuff that has to come later.
Exactly. I often say that, you can have all the money coming in that you want, but 7, 8-figure businesses, they go bankrupt if they're not managing their money correctly. And I'm not trying to fearmonger here, but this tends to be
it's kind of your thing, isn't it? you're an accountant. I've never met with an accountant and a lawyer who sat down and was like, let's be optimistic and not focus on all the things that can go wrong.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. Because, there's nothing worse than, having a client that comes to you for help. And it's like, you're on the borderline of being far too late for this. So we got to get your attention early so that you can grow and stay in business and keep doing what you love.
Okay. So profits, of course, are important. And I believe that most mature professionals understand, no matter if you're in a huge organization or a small organization, whether you're the owner or whether you're someone who's just getting into it. I believe most mature professionals understand that every organization needs to drive profit, because without the profit, you can't do R&D, you can't reinvest, you can't market, you can't, go up channel, you can't provide better services, better products, whatever it might be. And so we know the profits fuel everything. Now, I started my firm in 2006. I was 23. I didn't go to university. I didn't go to college. Didn't go to business. Perfect guy to start a business, right? But I was at a conference where I recall someone saying that, and this is in 2006. So this is 2 years before the Great Recession. And they were case studying General Motors and the fact that General Motors in 1 year in 91 or 92 or something lost $30 billion. They lost in 1 year $30 billion. But they had something like $45 billion of cash on hand. And the person said, it's not great to lose that much money, but it's not the end of the world, because a company can lose money as long as you have cash on hand, as long as you have access to cash, as long as you have cash flow.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me, because I realized that that profits will have great years, you'll have bad years, you may be over-investing, you might be purposefully investing heavily in the next phase of growth. But cash is what it really comes down to, isn't it?
Absolutely. Cash is like what I like to say is cash is queen. And you bring up an interesting point, right? Because you're saying, like, as long as you have cash to keep the business operating, then you're going to be okay. But the thing is, there's a lot of cash infusions that go into businesses when they're not being profitable, right? So cash infusion, but usually means bringing on debt. So you've got profit drivers that are going to drive your cash, and then you've got debt that's going to suck your cash away. So you have to be careful that you're not taking on too much debt, because when your debt ratio becomes too high, you're basically still going to run out of cash. Your cash resources will run out. So you want to focus on profit. And yes, most business owners understand that, but they don't understand how to create that profit. And there's really 3 simple tips when you're looking at profit drivers. You want to look at your price point. You want to make sure that you're pricing profitably. You want to look at your sales volume. You want to make sure that you understand how much you need to sell each and every month in order to break even and create profit margins that you're going to be happy with. And then the third is you want to watch your expenses, because if your expenses are too high, they're going to suck away your cash. So yes, cash is queen in a business, but you have to manage that well. Like, there has to be a balance between your profit and your debt utilization ratios.
And you mentioned your break even. I've never been great at this, but I've been often recommended to focus not on a break even, but a profit break even. So that way you would actually bake the amount of returns, 15,
I said
20,
break
25%.
even and then to hit your profit targets.
Yeah. But is that something that everyone should be doing?
Absolutely. You need to know your sales target each and every month. So what I do with my clients is we look at what you need to absolutely break even. And this is why I talk about it, is especially if you're a startup. I mean, at the very least, you want to break even. And then when you get your profit margin target in place, and, I'm just going to use 30% as an example, because that's generally across the board, but depending on your industry.
Is it 30% net profit?
Across the board, if you're a product-based business. Now, if you're a professional service, you're going to be higher, a lot higher.
Sorry, are we talking about net profit, or are we talking about gross profit?
We're talking about net profit.
Net profit. I've never been able to really maintain more. I mean, I pay myself a salary and then I look for profit, but I've always maintained like 15 to 20, and I've always found it hard to push more than that.
Was that right?
Yeah, no, I'm now curious, like what am I doing wrong?
I'd like to know too, because I'm like, especially because I think you're mostly service-based, aren't you?
100% service-based.
Yeah, you should be much
salaried,
higher.
A lot of payroll.
Okay.
A lot of
Yeah.
payroll, but maybe I'm just investing in a lot of stuff that doesn't work, I guess, or something perhaps. But yeah, I've always thought that a 15 to 20% net profit on a professional services firm after having paid everything and even my own salary was
Yeah. I mean,
reasonable.
with the caveat of I don't know how much you're paying yourself as, your own boss,
Yeah.
right? Like, because there could be some, number of things going on there. But if, take out what your salary is, and if you're looking at how much profit margin that's coming in, like it goes right back to the three profit drivers. Are you pricing competitively? Are you hitting your sales targets, and are your expenses too high? And this is why I always say know your numbers, right? And when I say know your numbers, we always look at your marketing numbers, your sales conversion numbers, and then your financial KPIs.
Fantastic. So when you sit down and you look at a balance sheet or you look at a P&L, I'm curious actually if those are the things that you're looking at. So when you're taking an assessment of an organization, what are you asking for? What are you looking at? And then what are the line items or I guess the items or the classes on the balance sheet or the P&L that you're really looking at to tell the story?
Yeah, so we start off looking at the P&L because that's really where your profit drivers are, right? And we focus on it, like we look at where your business is currently. Like this, tell
3 year,
me,
1 year, fiscal year to date, like what kind of P&L?
well, it's a P&L plan is what we do, right? So we're just looking at the template of a P&L. And we look at where you are currently in your business. So we list out all the revenues that you have coming in, all the expenses going out, and then we analyze it. We're going to look at all the KPIs. Most importantly, your net profit margin. If your net profit margin and you're a service-based business, I'm looking at you to be at least 50%, at least. And most of the professional service-based businesses I work with, provided that they're not selling any products, are usually coming in between 60 to 80%.
Net profit.
Yeah. Yeah. But it depends on how your business is structured, right? So you have to look at what you're investing in. So say you're investing in a lot of marketing, but there's no return on it. You got to figure out where the problem is and how to fix it. So we look at all the numbers, like everything, like the leads coming in, how they're converting, where they're converting. Are they converting on your landing page, or is it more your offers, or like what's going on? What are your sales conversion numbers? Are they, comparative to your industry? Look at the problem, look at the sales volume, and then look at your expenses and say, okay, what am I paying for that's way too high? Like, what's the industry average? And where can I start cutting back?
I love the way that you're approaching this because you're approaching this the way that an entrepreneur would, which is let's look at our acquisition sources, our cost of acquisition, our cost of delivery. Let's look at this from end to end as opposed to, frankly, most of the accountants I've worked with in the past want to focus on, accounts receivable aging. They want to focus on like, hey, let's make sure we close the month out or the quarter out or the year out properly, and let's pay our taxes.
Yeah.
But you're coming at this from a much more holistic, almost like CEO, CFO, COO, like, hey, let's look at the entire health of the business.
Yeah.
Most
Yeah.
CPAs don't do that, do they? Or if I just
Well, this is
missed the
why I
boat on
like
this.
I'm kind of a different CPA, right? Like, and there's different, like the reality is with CPAs, you've got CPAs that are tax focused, like they're specialists in tax. And then you've got other CPAs that are more like growth strategists, like me.
Yeah.
Like that's kind
So
of
there's
like the
tax, there's
CFO
audit,
role.
there's like all these different
There's
versions
all
of
different types of roles. And I personally, like, I find tax a snooze fest. What I love is looking at the business and see how we can make it more profitable. So that kind of falls more under like, if you're working with a fractional CFO, that is who you want to work with you, right? Because if you're using your tax accountant, their job is they're going to look at your books, they're going to make sure everything's categorized correctly, and they're going to do your taxes. And they may give you a couple of tips on how to improve, but they're not invested in your day-to-day operations like a fractional CFO or a full-time CFO would be. The goal of a CFO is to increase profitability in the business.
And so if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I'm in business development, I'm in marketing, I already have my organization, it's running really, really well, and I have a CFO down the hall from me who takes care of all this stuff, because you may not be in startup, you may not be in a small business, you may not be the entrepreneur who's leading the business. What do you recommend for the employees of organizations, for the people who, like, what should the employees of an organization who's not the owner, what should they be focusing on to ensure that the company or the organization or their department or their returns are helping leadership approach it the way that you're suggesting?
Yeah. And, I wouldn't put all the onus on the employees, right? The leaders have to provide targets for their employees to meet up to, right? So, like, let's use, for example, sales. So the owner is going to understand what their sales targets are, and they're going to pass down these sales targets to each salesperson, right? And this is your quota. This is what you need to make each and every month. So that person understands how they contribute to the profitability of the business. Whereas there's other people, like admin people, or I'm just trying to think, it's been so long since I've thought about it in a larger corporate view.
You got middle management, you got admin.
Yeah,
you got
like
comms.
Your middle management is going to have targets that they have to meet. Like, it's all about KPIs and meeting your KPIs, right? Because there are hundreds of KPIs out there. So you can't follow every KPI for the business. So an owner would assign certain targets. Like, KPIs are key performance indicators, and most corporate people understand that jargon. So they're going to understand what their targets are for their unit, and they're going to meet them or exceed them.
Okay. So it's got to come from leadership.
It's really got to.
You have to have the strategy. You have to have the plan. You have to be able to turn it into something that you can actually measure. You have to pass that down. You have to make sure that everyone's running those structures and then report back.
Yeah, you have to be accountable to those and review those, whether they're meeting them or not, right? At least on a monthly basis, so that you can catch problems that are coming earlier. And I'm not talking about employees doing that review. It's like middle managers or like whatever level of management, but review your numbers every month to make sure that you're either hitting or exceeding your targets. And if you're not, then you know that there's a problem that needs attention. You need to figure out what's going on within the business that's keeping you from meeting your targets.
That was something that because I did start so young, and I started with nothing, and I grew a company, and we've worked through a few recessions since then and some other challenges. Yeah. I've grown a company, I've contracted a company, and I've regrown it. But one thing that always surprised me as a bit more of a startup entrepreneur hustle kind of person was how much time, energy, investment, and bureaucracy, once a business hits a certain size, you have to start to put into place. Like, it stops being about just the work and the productivity and the efficiency and sending the invoices out and getting the checks in, and it starts to become like a lot of time and resources have to go into the systems of the organization. There's a great book that I quite like. And I know that you've written a book as well. So sometimes people are like, why are you referencing a different book when I have my book here? But Rigging the Game by Dan Nicholson, he talks about when businesses hit a certain size. But the vast majority of in-house accounting teams or in-house reporting or in-house financial statements are written by accountants for accountants. And much of the training that goes out there is created by accountants for accountants. And much of the forecasting is by accountants for accountants. And there's like this huge divide where it's like, I don't like, looking back, I wish I had spent way more time, energy, focus, resources on building up all the bureaucracy and the systems and everything else, because I've learned some hard lessons. But at the time, no one could convince me to do so, because they were all like accountants creating accountant things for accountants. And I looked at it and I went, this doesn't help me. This doesn't help me manage. Yeah. This doesn't help me grow. This doesn't help me make smart investments or have to cut back or whatever it is. Yeah. And so I know that you've talked a bit about this. How do we get over that divide of most of the stuff that's out there is actually created for people who love it, and it doesn't work for people like me?
Yeah. And I get it, because like when I listen to an accountant, even I get bored and I check out, right? Because I'm like, you're just like, it's too much. It's too much. So this is my approach, right? This is why I decided to take the approach I do. Like, I write for Forbes, I have my blog, She Means Profit, and I wrote my book. And what I'm trying to do is talk to the average person who doesn't have this financial knowledge and teach them about it. try to help you understand why it's important to learn about it, and then start learning about it, right? We don't need to be using these high-level accounting jargon words that confuse people, or that monotonous tone of voice that's going to put people to sleep, and talk about, debits and credits and key ratios and all that crap, right? Because quite frankly, it is dry and boring, right? You care about your money. You want to know how much money you can make, and you want to make the most money that you can possibly make. So let's get to it. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what's going to get your attention. And then all the other things are going to follow.
And so your book, Cash Confident, An Entrepreneur's Guide to Creating a Profitable Business, and all of the speaking and all of the engagements and all of the consulting and everything that you've done. So it's not like by the time it gets baked into a book, it's the first draft. This is years.
Yeah.
But when the book goes out, there's always this like, oh, that surprised me. I didn't realize people would jump on this thing, or that would be the chapter that would pop, or that me saying this would lead to this question over and over and over again. So I'm curious, within the book, Cash Confident, what are the 2 or 3 things that are constant themes that continually come up and you spend all day, every day addressing?
That's such a good question. Money mindset, business financial plans, and cash management. So money mindset is truly one of the most important things as a business owner to have, a positive money mindset. People have no idea how their relationship with their money affects the success in their business. And then for the cash management, everybody wants to know about cash management because most people are struggling with cash and not understanding that your cash balance is not equaling the profit in your business, right? Your cash balance is something completely different from profit. And another thing that I find really interesting too, and it comes up a lot, is because there's a lot of talk about profit first, especially in the online world. And I don't know if you're familiar with profit first, but it confuses people. So the concept is, pay yourself with the profit that you make, except they're not making profit. So when we do the business financial plan and stuff, we always ensure that you are including a budget to pay yourself, because you don't pay yourself with what's left over. You have to pay yourself first, right? So this is definitely a struggle for a lot of business owners.
So money mindset, cash management, the third?
Well, I was going to say business financial plan, but I would go with the profit first method because that is one that constantly comes up, and I am constantly referring to it.
So the money mindset, I want to circle back around on that because I've heard many different things. And so are we talking about like abundance mentality, or are we literally talking about like, hey guys, money is a resource that exchanges for this, or like, I like woo-woo stuff, so I don't want to say like, let's not get too woo, but what is money mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a woo-woo person to a certain degree, right? This manifestation, like just envision it and the money's going to land in your hands.
Yeah.
Like that does not work for me.
No,
I'm
not
like,
quite.
Yeah, like let's be realistic here. So money mindset, when I talk about it, it is basically looking at your relationship with money, and it all boils down to self-worth, right? So a lot of business owners struggle with their money mindset in the sense that, especially women, I see a lot of, well, if I make a lot of money, people are going to think I'm greedy. People won't like me, stuff like that. So those things are holding you back in your business. Or money mindset in the terms of making a lot of sales. A lot of people hold themselves back from making sales because they're so afraid of the rejection. Like it boils down to how you feel in your relationship about money. And a lot of people don't realize how that affects their business.
That's so interesting. When I started, I remember some people referring me some business, and the business just wasn't good enough for me. Like it just wasn't quality work. It wasn't quality client, and they didn't have the budget they needed. So it was like, to me, it was very clear, but I hadn't known your business. Like, so I rejected and said no to the business because it wasn't good enough for my expectations. But meanwhile, I had nothing else to do.
Yeah.
And the person who referred me the business got pretty offended. They were like, oh, it must be nice to be so, I don't know, egotistical or something like that. And to me, it was just like, well, I don't get it. Like, if they want to move forward, it costs X. They don't have X. this is not an emotional thing to me. Like if you want to pay less, you do less. If like it's like we can change the scope. But I didn't get it. I was maybe too robotic. I did not understand it. But you're saying that more people are really, they tend to undersell or devalue themselves, or they don't kind of have that same burgers approach that I might have.
Yeah, I think the point that you're making in your story is that you knew your worth and you weren't going to work for less. And that's totally acceptable, right? Because it's like, you look at your time invested versus what you're going to get in return. If it doesn't pay off, then don't do it.
But the thing was, I had no other work to do. So it's like,
I mean, that could have been a money mindset issue in the sense that, you needed that money and it could have helped you. But on the other hand, were you just keeping open space for what was really suitable for you, right?
Maybe I was just offended. I was like, I am worth so much more than this. I'm not doing that. No.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I always find referrals, sometimes they're hit and miss, right?
We can do a whole thing on referrals. I mean, that was a lesson that actually took me a very long time to learn. And part of this podcast has helped train that into me. So I'm 17 years into business, but realizing that I don't have to help every person that comes my way, and that I can choose the business that I want to take on, because I knew I could choose who I targeted. But once people came to me for help, I always was like, I felt really bad about being like, well, you're not really quite who I could work with for whatever reason. And so that takes, I do know that takes a lot of confidence to be able to jump into that stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, that's part of the money mindset thing is you understand, you make those choices because you want to build the most profitable business that you can build. So if you have a good, positive money mindset, you're going to make those choices like you did, where it's like, I'm going to focus more on the profit side. And whether that's consciously or subconsciously, you're noticing what's better for your business.
So I'm speaking with Melissa Houston. She's a CPA and CGA and author of the book Cash Confident, and fellow Canadian, which I love.
Yay.
And I have known about you for a few years now because for whatever reason, I would go on these podcasts. I'd be invited on these podcasts. And when you jump onto a podcast, I always like to listen to a whole lot of episodes, so I understand the audience and the tone. And there were like, I think 2 or 3 occasions where you were literally on the previous podcast that I was listening to.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I've heard you a whole bunch of times. I really appreciate what you're doing in your message, because it's something that we all have to deal with at no matter what level of business. You can't get away from the numbers. You can't get away from the finance. You can't get away from cash flow and managing it. As painful as it might be, you can't just hope someone else will take care of it. And while you can hire a fractional CFO, you can hire a great bookkeeper, you can hire an accountant, you can hire these people into your team. At the end of the day, the responsibility is still on leadership.
Absolutely.
Right?
You don't need to be an accountant, but you need to understand the finances in your business. That's like saying you're running your household without having a clue of what comes in and out of your household. Same for your business.
Most people do that, right? Like I don't. When my wife and I got married and we were really broke, we had a budget, but we have not had a budget.
But you must have
most
an
people
idea
live like us, right?
Throw me a bone here.
This is why your message is so important. So I do have one final question for you. It's the question I love to ask everyone towards the end of the conversation. What would be your number one strategy or tip to help those of us who are listening sell more?
I mean, sales is definitely not my forte, but the first thing that comes to mind is have the confidence. Confidence sells. Just be confident in what you're doing and don't think of it as selling, think of it as helping.
Okay, to break down now my 3 key takeaways from this talk, let's get into the 3-point roundup. Number 1, you've got to have a positive money mindset. And this is really, really hard. I've done a lot of work in this space, and I've read books, I've worked through exercises, but I think Melissa's 100% right. Developing a positive money mindset means you don't only have to really face and overcome the fear of rejection and negative perceptions about what wealth actually means, Often people are afraid of success, in fact. But it's really essential to be able to get the skills you need to avoid, traps of like underpricing or giving everything away. Obviously not charging enough, but letting expenses run out of control. All of these things are really important, and it comes back down to how you look at, how you believe your relationship with money. Key lesson number 2, effective cash management matters. And that means you got to be able to, of course, tell the difference between cash on hand and actual profits, your AR, your accounts receivable dates, how long cash is coming in, your expenses to revenue, all of those. You can tell right now that I'm not, in fact, a CPA because I'm listing all the things that I know are important, but I don't even know what they're really called. The point is that you need to be able to implement a really smart budget, and that means making sure that you are watching cash on hand as opposed to just P&Ls or balance sheets or other things like that. And I guess if you're like me, I have a controller who I trust who takes care of all of this for me, a partner in my business. But if you're like me, where this is not something that is your background that you're an expert in, then perhaps a fractional CFO, perhaps someone like Melissa, you have to bring that into your business. It is key. And key lesson number 3, getting strategic around your pricing strategies and your sales targets. This is so fundamental to creating a profitable business model. Because yes, you have to control expenses, but you need a really strategic pricing strategy, and you need to set sales targets, because more often than not, businesses have a revenue issue, and that actually makes the expense issue more painful. There you have it. Those were my 3 key takeaways from this talk, but what was yours? What was the number one thing that you learned in this conversation? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? I want to hear from you. Head over to LinkedIn. Make sure that you give me a look up. My name is Mark Drager. I'm the black and white photo with the little blue background. Drop me a DM with your thoughts. I want to jump into the conversation with you. And while you're over on LinkedIn, be sure to give Melissa Houston a follow. You can also check out her book, Cash Confident. You can find it at all of the Amazons and the Barnes and Nobles and the Chapters if you're in Canada, or I guess it's Indigo now, isn't it? You can find it everywhere where books are sold. You can also follow Melissa on Instagram. Her handle is Melissa Houston CPA. You can find her on Facebook as well. And one last thing. If you've made it this far into the episode, into the show, you probably should subscribe. And here's why. Every single week, me, my team, Emil, Lucas, Leonidas, me and my team, we work really hard to make sure that we share the practical strategies and tips you need to supercharge your business, your company growth, and boost sales. And so the best thing you can do to show us that we are doing a good job is give us a subscribe. We not only work really hard on them, but we have some really cool things coming up in the future that I want to share with you. And so with that, I am Mark Drager. I will catch you in the next episode.